I'm Christy.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is The Psychic
and The Skeptic. Welcome to our second episode of the podcast. Christy and I are going to be talking about the psychic in the second episode. But before we get in, we want to thank you for coming back to our podcast and listening to the second episode. So hopefully you didn't miss our first episode where we really went into where and how we got started with the world of the paranormal and becoming paranormal investigators.
Yeah, so if you missed it, you gotta definitely go back and check it out.
Yes, so we had a couple of stories and we threw in a little bit of evidence. So Christy and I, just to kind of refresh your memories, we've been paranormal investigators. I've been for about 14 years and you've been for how long?
25?
25?
Yeah. So a combined total of about 40 years, right.
And growing, so we still investigate. We do have a paranormal team. Christy started this paranormal investigation team.
Yep. It's called OKPRI, stands for Oklahoma Paranormal Research and Investigations.
And so you are our lead investigator. You're the founder of our group, and I'm the historical researcher and an investigator. Kind of a little tech guru. I like to really get my hands in there with the cables and figuring out all the troubleshooting. I've learned a ton over the years about tech, and I really got into that part too. But we do have a tech manager.
I think Kathy knows more than he does, though. And hey, you forgot something on my title.
We're a team. What's that?
The Bloodhound. The Bloodhound.
Yeah,
and that's what this whole podcast is about today.
Kind of stemming off of the being our psychic of the group. Not every investigative team has somebody who we would consider sensitive. Psychic isn't really what you like to be termed, too. Is that correct?
Yeah, weirdo's fine, but no.
That's me too.
Strongly intuitive. I mean, if you call me psychic, it's fine. Just know that I'm not one of those cheesy psychics. You know, call me now for your free reading.
Yeah, Christy does not have a crystal ball.
Nope.
No, and that's kind of why we're here too, because I think some people really don't understand what that is. They think you're future telling, and this whole episode is about clarifying all the different gifts that are under the umbrella of being quote unquote psychic.
Correct.
So we'll use that layperson term, especially in our title, as you know, the Psychic and the Skeptic, but it's not really a term that I remember you being comfortable with being called a psychic.
Right. And I think that's just because for so many years I just battled if having these gifts was okay, right? Since I was raised very religious. In fact, I was raised Pentecostal holiness, old time. So this type of stuff was just taboo and you just didn't talk about those things, right? But spiritualism has been around for a very, very, very long time. People with gifts even go way back. I think some of the, to explain spiritualism, in about 1848, and yes, this is a history lesson because Kathy and I are both history nerds.
Yes.
So, but in 1848 in Hydesville, New York, we have this family, the Fox family. And what they did is they moved into this new home, and there were two sisters specifically, and it was Maggie and Kate, and they started noticing these rapping sounds, and it totally freaked them out. They didn't know what was going on. And they basically used the rapping or the tapping, knocking sounds to communicate with the spirit that was present in their home. So this spirit ended up telling him that he was some peddler years and years ago who was actually killed and buried in their basement. And he was in some sort of trunk or something found that belonged to him. But some reports say when they dug up the basement, he wasn't there. Others say that he was. So depending upon what source that you read. But basically, Maggie and Kate grew up and they became known as psychics, right? Or those that can communicate with the dead. And they were also documented for being the spiritualists, like leading the spiritualistic movement, which was very popular back in the early 1900s. With that said, we're just going to elaborate a little bit more on the psychic.
Yes, and that kind of brings in the skeptic piece too. So how does the skeptic fit into this? And so back in history, in our minds, things that we didn't understand were considered paranormal or spiritual, or must have been created by God or a God if you're multi-theistic. When things weren't understood, it became something paranormal or something spiritual. So the skeptic is usually like, well, if you're seeing or hearing things, this is just you using that to explain away the paranormal phenomenon. But I personally come into this podcast as an open-minded skeptic, because over the years, I learned and watched Christy pick up on things that I knew she had no previous information coming into an investigation with. And looking into how would she know these kind of things, testing out, seeing it for yourself. I know a lot of us look at those people on TV that will sit down and do a reading with someone, and we think, as a skeptic, we're like, well, they previously had knowledge, this is scripted, but it's totally different. And another reason why I got into investigating is that I want to see for myself how this phenomenon develops. And so there's a lot that we don't know, and I think as skeptics, we need to be open-minded and to listen, because not everything is completely understood, as one of our catchphrases goes, right? So,
and even throughout the year, one of the biggest skeptics, because I was talking about the beginning of the spiritualistic movement, and one of the biggest skeptics, he's also known as a magician, is Houdini.
Right.
So Houdini actually was very close to his mother growing up, and his mother passed away. And for a long time, they had put it out there that if anyone could convince Houdini, it would be to bring about his mother, right? And to get a message from his mother. And so many different spiritualists or psychics tried, and Houdini found them all to be fraudulent. And then he made it one of his life's missions to go through and debunk spiritualism and debunk all the psychics.
Yeah,
so,
I forgot all about that. Yeah, he was big into that, but you don't really hear that. You just hear about his tricks and how he died too.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
very cool.
You're not the only skeptic, though.
No, and it's okay to be one, but it's more fun to be an open-minded skeptic and to explore and experiment with the gifts out there. So that's why I like being our historical researcher for our investigation team. I know the history and the background, and I get to keep a big secret as we go into an investigation that, like, I know what happened here. I wonder if Christy's going to be able to pick up on it. And then many, many times you do. You pick up and you can sense spirit that's there. Or, it may not be an actual ghost. It could be just the energy, and you're able to read that energy and interpret it into what potentially could have happened on that location. So it gives me goosebumps even just thinking about it every time. But that's the cool part, is when you have your skeptical mind and then something happens that makes you have to doubt your own skepticism.
And you're welcome.
Yeah. So it's fun. And this is why we're here for a podcast. We have all these interesting conversations. Obviously, we respect each other's points of view. And I love that Christy's open to the skepticism. I love being open to there being more out there than what we understand. So help us to understand all the different terms out there, because some people, they hear psychic and they know only one thing, that you just predict the future and that you need to do my lottery numbers this week, right? So
right, and that's not what it's all about, for sure. Although I did come really close one time with the lottery numbers.
Oh, you didn't tell me that.
Oh, this was quite a few years ago. And
but it doesn't work that way, obviously.
No, it doesn't. But I had a couple of friends of mine who actually went to go buy some lottery tickets, and they're like, hey, Christy, they're like, what's the magic numbers? And I thought for a second, you know what? It's a combination of 5s and 3s. And come to find out, honest to God, it was combinations of 3s and 5s. You had like 53 and 35 and 30, and I thought, man, if I would have played, I might would have won. But no, it doesn't always work that way. If so, I would be extremely rich, right? I always say that information is given to you to know. Like if I'm doing a reading for someone, that information is given to you to know as you need to know it. And that is basically to help guide you on whatever journey that you are on. So it's not like those who claim to be psychic or strongly intuitive have all the answers, right? Because we don't. There's been many times I've done a reading for someone and I'm told that they're not allowed to know. And I know there's some sort of code on the other side, right? To where information that can be given can only be given to a certain point. And if it gets to where it's going to affect a person's free will and free choice, information will not be given.
Right. And so this could go into religion too. So I mean, this spans all religions in a sense, like all those religions that believe that there is another side to it, or something that happens spiritually after people pass, or that you have spiritual guides. So you could look and, I mean, that could be a whole other episode on different religions. But those are common questions we get from our clients. So as paranormal investigators, we often have people reach out to us with activity in their home, and they want us to come by and help them to figure out what's going on. And usually they're scared. They think it's something really negative.
Or demonic. A lot of them automatically jump that it's a demonic spirit. And one thing about the churches is, a lot of them don't believe in the paranormal.
Right.
So we've had a lot of clients that's come to us and they're like, hey, we've got something going. We've reached out to our church and they won't come out and bless the home or help us with it. So, if they're not finding it from religious sources, then where else are they going to turn to? Of course, they're going to turn to somebody else who may know a little bit about what's going on within the field of the unknown or the paranormal.
Right, yeah. That's kind of what we want to do, is just to help people. I mean, as the skeptic, I'll go in and look at what could logically be explaining some activity, and I've been able to do that as well. And then we kind of leave them with, all right, we've tried everything with this particular happening. We saw this ourselves, which validates things for them, and then they feel like they're not crazy for experiencing something strange because we saw it too. I mean, that happens sometimes, and we try to help them to deal with whatever it might be, whether it's just get an electrician or maybe you need to, maybe this is something spiritual, and maybe getting in tune with your spirituality and trying to communicate and set boundaries spiritually with whatever might be present. Those are things that we talk to our clients about. But anyway, back to psychics.
Yeah, so what exactly is a psychic, right?
Right.
They're basically, it's going to read as relating to or denoting some sort of phenomenon that's apparently inexplicable by natural laws, especially involving telepathy or clairvoyance. And, basically unable to be explained or accounted for. That is what psychic is known. So it's something supernatural that you don't understand that can't be explained by any of our physical senses.
Right. And in the paranormal field, we have friends who have different abilities that are under this psychic ability or sensitive. Again, I like that term a little bit more, that you're sensitive. So some people have certain gifts where they see or they hear things or they feel things. Some people have heard of like empaths, where you feel feelings projected onto you. So what are some of the different, like what else is out there?
All right, well, some of the more common ones, of course, are going to be like clairvoyance, right? Clairaudient and clairempathy. So I can break those down a little bit more and explain kind of what those are. So, of course, clairvoyant, that is going to be more of your common one. And basically, that's where you see, some people
that's like
say
the typical, what we think of when we hear the word psychic.
Right? Yeah. And people are kind of known for having that third eye in their forehead, right? So when I first was developing my gifts and working with them, I used to get these really bad headaches. And a friend of mine who had been dealing with her gifts and using her gifts for years, she's like, yeah, that's because of your vibration levels, right? So your brain is basically speeding up to try to tune into those frequencies, which causes the headaches. So one thing that's kind of interesting, again, going back and doing a little bit of that history, is that clairvoyant is basically a mid-19th century French term. So clear or clair means to see, and then, or it's clear. Yeah, and then to see is voir. Is it voir? I'm not very good at my French.
Je parle peu de français.
I know you speak a little French.
Just a bit.
That's great. I speak English, so that's about it. I might
and you speak psychic.
And I speak psychic. Very good. But anyway, it's basically the ability to see. And some people, they can be clairvoyant and not have any other type of gift. So when we look at clairaudient, that's going to be your ability to hear.
Right. And you have that. You have both of these.
I do, yes. As well as the clairempathy, which is like being empathic. You can feel emotions.
That's really common. There's a lot of people talk about being an empath. And I think women really, in general, are pretty empathic. We can pick up on other people's feelings pretty easily.
Yeah, maybe more so than what the guys are. No
Not
offense
leaving
there,
the guys
guys.
out. Yeah, no, there's lots out there too. But I wonder if that's more common.
It could very well be.
Yeah.
Maybe there needs to be more
the
scientific
skeptic is
study.
just saying we're more observant, perhaps. Women are supposed to be in tune just by nature and raising children, being in tune with feelings and the needs of an infant who can't communicate. So that's where the skeptic would say, like, oh, you're just in tune with that side of you,
right?
Which nature makes us born that way as women.
Well, and I explained in the last episode how that I realized that I had some experiences as kids, right? Like seeing things, and I would hear things, but I didn't understand it. And I really didn't have anybody to turn to discuss those with either, because being raised Pentecostal holiness, I was told, look, that's all of the devil. You're going to die and burn in a fiery hell if you even think on that, right? So that pretty much scared the crap out of me to where I had to wait until I was an adult before I could explore that a little bit further. And so I did have a friend of mine when I was in my early 20s, and no, I'm not going to give away my age, but I will say when I was in my early 20s, a friend of mine was also interested in paranormal investigating, and so invited me along to the cemetery, and it was kind of out in a rural county in Oklahoma. And I pretty much told him he was nuts at first. I was like, nope, I ain't going. And he kept after me for a while. And finally I was like, okay, well, I am curious, So we drove out to this old rural cemetery. And I remember going down this dirt road and seeing these trees, that are like hanging over the road, something like you would see out of a Scooby-Doo cartoon, right? Yeah. So it's like, turn back, that is up ahead. So, and then we got to the cemetery, and I really had to psych myself up because honestly, I was a little bit scared of what might happen. But of course, I had Hollywood's version of the hand coming up from the grave and grabbing my ankle and taking me down. So, but anyway, we went into the gates, and it was, of course, it had to be one of those gates that's like, when you open it up. But walking around, and we had our flashlights, and I thought, okay, well, this isn't so bad. But I started seeing things in the cemetery. Like I saw these shadow figures.
So do you think you were noticing these things because you were there to investigate, or?
Yeah, and I also think that I was aware of my gifts, and I think that I was very heightened. My senses were heightened.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So does that normally happen on an investigation? Because like you can walk around, you can go to Walmart or whatever. I mean, is this something that happens when you're not expecting to see things, or do you really have to tune in to see it?
That's a good question. Yeah. So I think in the very beginning for me, when I was learning how to develop my gifts, I think I kind of had to really learn to shut everything else down and out, and okay, put on your psychic eyes, as far as raising my awareness and being mindful that, hey, I'm not in Walmart, right? I'm in a cemetery. Yes. What am I going to see? Yeah. So, and I know in the very beginning, I was like a sponge. I was trying to learn everything that I could about the paranormal, right? And where you have good, you also have bad. And through time and experience, you learn how to filter all that out, right? And use your spiritual protection. But in the beginning, I didn't know about any of that.
Right. You had nobody to guide you.
No, not at all.
Nobody to mentor you through figuring things out, right?
Right. Yeah. There weren't even any teams in Oklahoma, paranormal teams at that time. Right. So, my team is the oldest in Oklahoma. So anyway, I get out in this cemetery and I start to see these shadows, right? These shadow figures. And so I won't lie. I was a bit spooked because I know, I can see them. They can definitely see me.
Could your friend see them though?
No.
Okay. So
he could not.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, I would ask him, hey, do you see that over there?
Yeah.
He's like, no.
That's where the skeptic thinks you're what? You're a little crazy, right?
Right. Well, and he was aware that I was highly intuitive.
I mean, we're friends. I know that that you're not clinical, that you don't have any kind of hallucinations, you're not on any medications that's going to cause anything like that.
No.
But that's what, the skeptic point of view would be like, what are you taking, Christy? What are you on?
Right. No,
but I know you well now. I know. This is why I'm more open than I used to be. It's just because I've gotten to know you over time, and
Right. Well, in fact, I mean, I hold a master's in psychology for LPC, right?
So the mind is so interesting, and how are we able to see the? I mean, we all have pets that kind of have like a sixth sense about things, or maybe they see things better than we do, or hear things better than we do. So,
I've seen pet spirits too, so I definitely know that they're around. I didn't see any in the cemetery that night. All I saw was those shadows, right? And at the time, digital cameras were like super expensive. Without giving away my age, black and
too
white.
Late. I think they all know.
Well, you're as young as you want to be and feel, but 35 millimeter.
You're always going to be older than me, though.
Hey! Only by a couple of years. Shut it. But yeah, 35 millimeter film was still very common.
In investigating way back then, we were using the disposable cameras, the ones that you drop off and get developed.
Yes,
pick it up in 24 hours or
right.
Or the 1 hour photo places,
Which I don't even know if that still is around anymore. Do they even have that?
Yeah, you can do. I think there's places, pharmacies you can drop your. I think they'll develop the old film too. Still,
Wow. Okay. We are telling our age. So
I'll interrupt here. When it comes to investigating, we're going to have an episode probably on photography as well.
Yes, definitely.
There's a lot that I'd love to talk about with spirit photography and the old way that we used to take photos versus the way that everybody's capturing photos today. Mm-hmm. So a little preview of what's to come. But carry on. Yeah.
So my friend and I, we walked through the cemetery, and of course I was avoiding those shadows, but I did have a 35 millimeter black and white camera because, there was theories back then about black and white versus color.
In paranormal photography?
Yes.
Ooh, yeah.
And on the light spectrums.
I never really talked about that one, but that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we can get into that more when we talk about our photograph.
Light spectrum is also very important to paranormal investigating. So,
yes. And I had done some reading, and I think that's why I chose the black and white film. So, but anyway, we were just taking random pictures throughout the cemetery, and I'll explain about those pictures here in a minute. But we had been there for about 2 hours, I suppose. And we had and of course, again, telling my age again, I had was a GE, I think, tape recorder.
Oh gosh,
it was the box
tape.
looking. Yeah, and it had like the handle, and I had like this omnidirectional mic that I was holding out with one hand, and I had the recorder holding it by the handle as we went through the cemetery. And after about 2 hours, we were like, okay, well, it seems like it's, fairly quiet. So we made the statement, my friend did, and said, okay, well, we're getting ready to leave. So if anyone has anything to say, now is a good time to do it, right? And no sooner, a couple of seconds after he said that, we heard leaves, like footsteps behind us crunching in the leaves. And so it's probably about fall, when this is taking place. So there were some leaves that had fallen on the ground. And we took the flashlight and put it behind us to look, and there was nobody there. But he and I both heard those footsteps, right? And so we left, and I, of course, went the next day, and I put in my 35 millimeter film into Walmart for development.
Whatever it was.
Excuse me. I was listening to my audio, and right there in those last few minutes, I did have one EVP. And you hear on the audio where we say, hey, we're getting ready to leave. If anyone wants to say anything, now's the time to do it. And then this EVP comes in. It's this woman's voice, and it's a Class C, so it's very light. But she says, hi, I'm Samantha.
So we have a copy of that we're going to play for you. But before we do, I want to remind you, if you missed the first episode, we briefly discussed what an EVP is, and we gave you one of our best examples of an EVP.
So go back and listen to it.
Yes, make sure you catch that one. But EVP stands for Electronic Voice Phenomenon. And what that is when we're investigating, we will record from an audio recorder all of our conversations.
Yeah. And turn it on the minute we get out of the car. Even.
Right. Because you never know when you might capture something. Right. And so EVP happens, it's when there's an extra voice there that we didn't hear at the time of the recording. So we don't know we've captured EVPs until we go back and listen. So they're voices that were not there at the time.
Yeah.
So, and we'll talk about audio recordings and audio evidence, electronic voice phenomenon,
and an upcoming
disembodied
podcast.
voices. Yes, so stay tuned because we'll have a whole other episode on that.
Yep.
But we do want to play that example for you.
And you need to really listen closely to the CVP because it starts right there at the beginning. It's a really short clip. So let's go ahead and play that.
Okay, so we're going to play that for you one more time. Okay, and now we're going to slow it down for you. Yeah, okay, so I hear it much better slower. It sounds to me like she's saying, I'm Samantha. You hear hi, I'm Samantha?
I think in the beginning I did, but when you slowed it down, I definitely think I could also hear that as well.
Or it's like combined, hi, I'm Samantha.
Right.
Yeah, that's
But
really
the point is she was there.
Yes.
You know,
but you didn't hear her say that. That showed up on your recorder later.
Correct.
So the theory with psychic ability in hearing, which we're going to get into in a second, is you might have been tuned into a different frequency,
Yeah.
and she was speaking on a different level where you couldn't hear her.
For sure.
So in this case, you saw these shadows as part of the clairvoyance.
Yeah.
That clairvoyance gift that you have.
And then it's backed up, though.
Right,
Not
right.
only did I see those shadows, right,
Yeah.
as part of clairvoyance, but there was more proof that spirits were there because I obviously got something recorded. Now, whether or not she was one of those shadows, I don't know.
You developed your film, too.
Yeah, I went to Walmart the next day, of course, that 35 millimeter film, and I got some really cool light anomalies. In fact, one of them I even used on the cover of my book that I wrote called Spirits Among Us.
Yes.
And we'll talk more about photos when we get into our photographic podcast session. So
Yeah, and we can even, if you're interested in Christy's book, we can talk about that, too. And
yeah, maybe at the end
we can link, get you a link on where you can find it. So EVPs, we don't necessarily hear when we're there, but sometimes you do hear things.
Yes, for
and
sure.
that's another gift of psychic ability, right?
That is correct. So basically, clairaudience is where you are able to hear. But now, some people hear in different ways. So for me, and again, every psychic or intuitive, whatever you want to call it, is different in their gifts, and sometimes we're alike. But I actually sometimes will hear the physical word, but then I also will see things in my mind. So when I first started out and I was learning to develop my gifts, I basically really had to focus on how I was hearing and getting in these images. So oftentimes I would, like I was in a movie theater, right? And I've got this big white screen in front of me. It's dark everywhere else. And sometimes I would see words on this screen. And then other times I just would hear them. And at first when I really didn't, I was like, second guessing myself because even though I knew that I had gifts, I'm very logically minded.
Right.
In the sense that I would tell the spirit, okay, repeat what you just said or show me what you just said. Because I was learning how to receive message.
Now, the skeptic in me says, these are just things your consciousness is imagining. But you describe this to me differently in that you can tell the difference between your own conscious thought and these signals that you're getting or hearing or seeing.
Right. That's why I would clear my mind and I would just focus on that white movie theater scene.
So it's almost meditative when you're, quote unquote, tuning in, right?
Yeah, back then for me. I mean, now, since I've been doing it for so long, I don't have to look at the movie screen or whatever. It's just there. It's like sometimes I'll just hear the words in my head and sometimes I'll actually hear what sounds like it's coming from my physical ear. And I mean, from being on investigations with me, sometimes if I see something or hear something, I'll be like, hey, did y'all see that? Did you hear that? And then I've heard you make the comment, no, but just must be in your head again. So, so and
that's another reason why we don't tell you the history too.
Oh yeah.
Because you, especially in those earlier years, you were trying to see what that difference is in what you see and hear. So knowing the difference between your own conscious thought versus what may be some kind of communication from some spirit.
For sure.
Right. So the more you've done that, the more you're able to feel that difference or tell the difference between your own thought and...
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We could probably give you the history of every case. Your gifts are strong enough and developed enough now that you know the difference between your own thought and something being communicated to you, right?
Yes. And if you remember, I've made a comment before, like when I go in to do my walkthrough to see what spirits are there and what they want, and then I'll tell you guys. And then I'm like, all right, well, mystery solved, Scooby-Doo, let's go, So just playing.
But we still keep the history and the stories and the claims from our clients from you before we start an investigation. Not because we don't trust that you don't know what you're hearing, what you're receiving, but it actually makes whatever we capture a little bit stronger, or whatever you capture and what you share that you're picking up on an investigation. It makes it stronger for the client too, because the client, it's still all trust. They trust that you don't have any of that information coming in. You're coming in clean. It just is a house and an address,
right?
And maybe the name of the client when we go in. A lot of us still have a healthy skepticism, and knowing that at least you're not aware of any of that information. We know that when you get it, it's like, hey, we didn't tell you that information.
Right.
And it makes that, again, quote unquote, evidence seem stronger towards the paranormal, that maybe there really is something to this. That's why we still keep the history from you before an investigation, just to help solidify what we're giving to the client, and they know that you weren't given that information.
Right. And I love how I'm able to validate things that you all know. And I feel like sometimes I'm even able to give a little extra information at times that y'all didn't even know, right?
Right, yeah.
Homeowner didn't even know.
Right, because before an investigation, I might do a preliminary history, so I kind of have an idea who lived there, what might have happened on a location, and then you might gather extra stuff that I didn't even know to look up, so I can dig deeper after we've done the investigation and validate what you saw or even heard.
Right. And that's what I love about having gifts, is because, when I can see things or when I can hear things, it really, I feel like it just enriches and helps the case. So, in fact, that reminds me of a case. It was it's called the Rouston, it's historical, actually, the historical Rouston Opera House and Theater. And it's in Rouston, Oklahoma. But basically, when I went there to investigate, I actually saw this dark-headed woman, and she was real young, probably in her early 20s. And she had told me that she wanted her husband to understand that the circumstances surrounding her death weren't really as they appeared. And she also expressed the need for her husband's understanding and forgiveness and acceptance. So basically what happened with her was back in 1916, the railroad brought a lot of the traveling shows in, and her and her husband one night went to go see one of these shows. She really loved it, wanted to go back the next night, and her husband's like, well, you can go ahead and go. He didn't want to attend that evening. So she went, and come to find out, she went all week long. And after that, the second night, she started meeting behind the stage after the show with one of the main actors that was there. And she ended up supposedly like falling in love with him or having some sort of emotional attachment to him. And some friends of the husband's told him, hey, every night your wife is going back behind the stage with this actor. And so he buys a ticket and goes up there, and as soon as the show's over, sees her run back behind the stage. So he happens to follow them and ask the stagehands back there, hey, do you know where this lady is and this actor? And they said, well, they're up on the roof. So he climbs the ladder, goes up on top of the roof, and catches them. Now, there's two versions of the story. One version is that he caught them in a romantic embrace. The other version of the story is that they were just standing on the roof talking. So then supposedly some sort of scuffle and fight breaks out between the actor and the husband. And the two versions again is that she is feeling very shameful about her circumstances, because back then, if a woman did something like that, she was ostracized from the community, right? You just didn't do things like that when you were a married woman. But one theory is that she was accidentally pushed off the top of the opera house, and it was like 4 stories. And then the other version is that she stepped off herself. Now, I do believe from what I had seen and felt, is that she was actually, she took a step off. And so in the afterlife, she's looking for her husband. She wanted to pass on that message. And people have seen her, the ghost of her, and a man up on top of the roof. So the actor did die. I won't get into a lot of details. People can check out our website for that if they want. But it's just the fact that if I can see and hear something both, that just makes things a lot better. And if we can get any sort of recorded evidence to go along with it, that's just icing on the cake.
Right, and the seeing and hearing gifts that you have, that's where you get your bloodhound nickname.
Right.
Because if anybody listening has ever done any investigating, they know it's a lot of sitting around waiting for activity to happen. But if you have some feelings or sensations, they might be guiding you to a different area of the location.
Right.
Or sometimes we don't even have to go anywhere. We can just stay in one place and get a lot of information just in one room of a location that we're investigating.
But I will go, I'll do my walkthrough. I will go from room to room to room to see what I can pick up on. And, sometimes if I go to a location where there's been a tragic death or something like that, then, I can usually pick up on that as well.
Yeah. There have been a few cases where you were hearing things, somebody was trying to speak to you. We're just driving there. We're probably a mile down the road, and you're like, oh, I got a woman. She's upset.
Yeah.
Because she can't find XYZ. And I'm like, okay, case solved. Let's turn around and go home. I haven't even gotten there yet.
Kidding.
No.
Well, and then let's move on with some other gifts. Another big one outside of clairvoyance and clairaudience is the clairempathy. And then you have
clairsentience, right? Isn't that very similar?
Oh, yeah. The clairempathy is the emotions. The other one is being able to sense feelings. And, a lot of intuitives might have this gift as well, or they may have all these gifts. I do have the ability to sense the emotions and the feelings too.
And we have a lot of people come up to us in conferences or the spirit fairs where we sometimes give presentations, or you have a table, or we have a table that talks about what we do. And a lot of people say, oh, I'm an empath. And so I feel like some people might have this skill or this gift, I guess, ability, but they're not able to see or hear. All they do is sense and feel emotions.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like that's the one that's pretty common, just based on getting out there and talking to people who come to our public events or things like that.
Yeah, and I've heard people say too, hey, I can walk into a place and I feel like I'm being watched, or something just doesn't feel right. I mean, that's all kind of that gift of empathy for sure,
Right.
So one good case I would say that I remember, and this was kind of earlier on in the early 2000s. I can't remember the year, maybe 2001, 2002, something like that. We did a residential investigation in Nakoma Park, Oklahoma. And the reason why this stands out to me so much is because the big part of this case, I would say, is what I felt. So I had gone in, we were doing a sit down, and I had seen this man come out of one of the rooms. And so I told the team, let's move to this room. So as soon as we had moved in there, we were getting set up. I was just starting to get seated into my chair when I felt an excruciating pain on the right side of my lower back. But I immediately knew, hey, he was stabbed in the back. So this was like a stabbing pain. And I just started to really tune into him. I seen the room change. And suddenly it was daytime, the windows were open, there was a breeze blowing the curtains. It was summer of 1977, and this spirit named Mark showed me what happened to him. And
So you started out feeling his feelings and transitioned to something visual.
Yes. But no, I could still feel too.
Right.
I felt the heat from the summer, right?
Oh.
I felt the breeze blowing in. And then I seen him come in, and he was very tired. He was wearing a pair of cutoff jean shorts and no shirt. He had shoulder length, sandy blonde hair, and he was getting ready to take a nap. I've seen him put both of his hands above his head like he's stretching, and he's getting ready to lay down on this bed to take a short nap. And all of a sudden I seen this hand carrying this knife. and I seen it plummet into his back on the right side. And he fell over onto this bed, and his right hand was dangling off. And then I saw a puddle of blood dripping from the side of the bed. Then suddenly I saw like these two beautiful crystal blue eyes. And then I saw this toddler. The eyes belonged to the toddler. And I seen him running across the doorway. And Mark began telling me that that was his son. And the little boy was in a diaper. And he came into the room, and his son went up to his body and was like shaking his arm, saying, "Dad, Dad, Dad, Dad." And I saw Mark standing beside the bed, and his arms were just outstretched to his son. And of course, he's in spirit, right? But he's saying, "Daddy's here, Daddy's here, Daddy's here." And I felt all of his emotions. I felt how sad he was and how upset that he was. And I just started bursting out in tears, and I just could not. They had to literally, yes, they had to literally just take me out of the room, and I had to take a break because I was so emotionally distraught.
You were feeling what he was feeling.
Yes, I felt everything that he was feeling in that moment. So to wrap this case up, I did some research with the Nakoma Park Police Department, and I did learn that in 1977 there was the murder of a man there. I couldn't get all the details on it because, of course, nothing was on computer back then, but I did do another investigation, a few investigations actually, and Mark told me that his killer was a young girl by the name of Alicia. And I do believe that she was probably 17, 18. She was very young, but she had some sort of mental health disorder, schizophrenia or bipolar something. And she wanted Mark, while they were alive, she wanted Mark to leave his wife and son and go and be with her because she was, very fascinated with him. And Mark wouldn't do it. And because he wouldn't, she felt the need to kill him. And she did. And I even know where the knife was buried. She showed me down the street where she used to live. It's buried at the base of this tree. And I really wanted to go dig up this knife, right? But you can imagine
that could be like a real case.
Yes. And you can imagine me going to knock on these people's door. "Hey, can I dig underneath your tree? Because I think there's this, murdered knife."
There have been cases that involve a murder that psychics have picked up on evidence, and the police force has to go in and do these kind of investigations or dig things up.
Yeah,
because,
for sure.
Could be an unsolved case, but that's really, really interesting.
Yeah. So needless to say, those that are sensitive, that are empathic to feeling emotions, right, and feelings, it's a very true thing. And I mean, this was a case that I will never forget just because of what I felt and what I saw and how it impacted me. So that gift is definitely real in there, for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of people claim to feel emotions and feelings without really understanding what's going on.
Yeah. And I mean, you have other gifts. There's the ability to smell, to touch, to taste. So you can sense a type of flavor, right? And it's the same as the smell. And I know smell even is associated with the olfactory nerve.
Right.
Would you like to describe that?
Well,
because I know you know a lot about that.
A little bit. The olfactory nerve is one of your cranial nerves, and as a nurse myself, I try to bridge some of how our brain works with some of the psychic senses or even some of the paranormal. Some say that the sense of smell is close to where your memory is, your memory center in your brain, and where you store memories. So that is why when, with this paranormal theory that you can smell perfumes of people your grandmother's old perfume or the cookies that grandma used to bake, and you're just sitting in your house and you get this sense of smell, and the theory in the paranormal field says that's your grandmother trying to communicate to you in a way that attaches you to your memory, so there's no doubt that it was grandma that was contacting you, or whoever. It could be also something that reminds you of it, if you want to look at it from the skeptical point of view or a scientific point of view, where your memory center is so close to your smell, you're starting to think about your grandmother, and then you seem to think that you're also smelling her perfume because it's just so close to that memory, and it brings you back to those times when you were with your grandparents. So it could be just a really strong connection to your brain when you're having a strong memory that is brought into your consciousness. So that's kind of the way I would think from a skeptical point of view, that you could explain away some of that type of sense.
Yeah, but from a psychic point of view, though, those are ways that spirits try to connect with us.
Right.
So not only through our senses of smell and through sight and through hearing, but even like, say for instance, you're in the car and suddenly a song comes on the radio that was like your mother's favorite song. Of course, mom's passed away, right? But that suddenly makes you think about your mother. And a lot of people don't know how to recognize those small little signs that, hey, spirit's trying to come through and tell you that they're here. And they will use our senses to be able to do that. It's not like they're Casper that just jumps out and says, boo, here I am, right?
Yeah.
So they do.
We don't always see those
ways.
signs. But this is where the paranormal and the skeptical can explain activity from both points of view. So we see that a lot in our investigations where, you could say, well, that's a popular song, so of course it's going to play on the radio at the time when you're thinking of your mom. And of course you would think of your mom often, and eventually those two will meet. That's the skeptical point of view. But then there's the case when that isn't a commonly played song on the radio. Mm-hmm. It's from 30 years ago, and you're on a pop station, and why was this song all of a sudden playing? Or, so there's some times where it's tough for the skeptic to explain it away, and it's a really big stretch to kind of find logic in some of these things.
Oh, I get it.
I'm not going to tell a client of ours that what they're experiencing isn't truly paranormal when it's something that is difficult to explain. I'll say, hey, this is the logical viewpoint. Mm-hmm. Take it for what it's worth. You're your own person. I want to give you that point of view so that you can then listen to that and then put your own experience with it together to determine if you really truly think that maybe this is grandma speaking, or maybe you're right. Maybe that is a common song. But then if it's spiritual activity trying to communicate with you, they're going to probably, I would assume, they would probably keep trying. And then you know it's not a coincidence. So there might be more ways that they're trying to communicate with you if you're not getting the message from them off of a song. So now you start to have other activity happening in your house. And so,
and that's again all the ways that you need to be sensitive to spirit and understand how they're trying to come through. I mean, I lecture on this. When I work the spirit fairs, I'll lecture on how you bridge the realms in between, our world and theirs, and how you recognize those little signs that spirit tries to come through to say, hey, I'm here. Yeah. So not only is there taste and touch, you can feel as well, as far as, put something in your hand. Does it vibrate? Do you have flashes of images that come through?
Oh, yeah. That's something that's kind of, I would say, gimmicky. If you go to a spirit fair and, you bring an object with you and you hand it to somebody. I mean, is that a common gift that psychics would have, just to be able to touch something and then get an image? I mean, to me, that kind of reminds me of the episode, the TV show Charmed, where she touches something and she gets a little flash. I mean,
of course, Hollywood.
The skeptic in me is like, okay, that's too Hollywood for me. But is that? I mean, do you know? Have you ever met anybody in the psychic circles that actually have that gift?
Yeah, me.
You touching
me. And I would say with this gift, it's hit and miss. But I have had clients that would bring a object to me, and I will actually feel that object, and I can get flashes of things.
So from a paranormal theory perspective, is that because there's energy attached to it and you're just feeling that energy? How is that? How do you experience that?
That's probably the easiest way I can describe it to you, but also their loved one. Because that loved one has touched that object and that loved one is present, I also will see and hear things because of that loved one's because through that loved one's energy, and along with that object that belonged to that deceased person.
Right. And well, in all the years we've been investigating it, I'm assuming this isn't something you often do, because I don't really recall you touching something on an investigation and seeing that. But can you remember a time when that happened?
I don't do it at every investigation unless I really feel compelled to do so.
We don't always know that there's an object with attachment, like some kind of emotional attachment on a case.
But I have gone into places, and I don't know if you notice, I might feel the wall, or I might feel a part of this or that.
So that's part of that.
Me doing that?
Yeah.
That is the reason, to see if there's bits and pieces of information that come in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just another gift that is definitely out there. And,
so that's that clairtangency, that touch, ability to touch? Okay.
Yes, for sure. And then, the next ability deals with, because you were mentioning psychic fairs and stuff, and readers.
All these, you can go to palm reading, or you can do the tea leaves, and you can get you can go to tarot too. What do you think about tarot? What gift is that?
Well, that is if I say it right, cartomancy. And that's
that's the one that doesn't have Claire in front of it. It's cartomancy.
I believe so, yeah. Okay. And that is just the ability to predict using cards. So
tarot.
Here's the thing. Yeah, tarot. And there's so many different types of tarot cards that's out there. I personally do not use them. I was gifted a pair of the Rider-Waite tarot cards right in the beginning when I started getting into...
Who gifted those to you?
A friend of mine, actually, at the time. We don't really talk too much anymore. I haven't talked to her in quite a while, but she used them when she did readings for people, and she's like, here, why don't you try them out? And I was like, okay. And they sat in my drawer for the longest time. And one day I thought, okay, let me just get these out. Let me mess with them, see if I feel any sort of connection with them. And I did try using reading. I had to read the book on them, what each card means. And I tried using them for a while. Then I was like, you know what? I need to put these down, because what I'm seeing and hearing and feeling doesn't match the definition of these cards. Now, no offense to anybody who uses cards or any sort of other tool, runes or whatever, tea leaves, more power to you. I don't connect with things like that.
Yeah, so it's a different ability, I guess. But the skeptic in me has a really, really hard time with tarot. I mean, it's interesting, and I'm not, again, like you're saying, no disrespect to anybody who truly can pick up messages from them, but it just seems like I shuffle a deck of cards, it's random pictures, and I feel like it would be easy for somebody to make up a story. And there's probably a lot of frauds out there that use that, and they can just twist it to work for something that person they're reading can connect with. But
it's called a cold read. Yeah. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And I mean, definitely they can tell you, oh, this card means that you've got money coming in, right? Or this card means
so it's
that
future telling.
Yes.
Yes. That I have a hard time with. I can, because of the experiences I've had with you, the clairvoyance and clairaudience is, what I've seen in action. And you don't really do a whole lot of future telling unless some spirit maybe is...
Well, in my
giving
readings,
advice,
in my readings I might, but how that works, it may be about a future decision that would change their path, right? Or it may be something that's important that they need to know to help them. Right. So it's not like you're predicting every aspect of their future, not at all.
It almost seems like that's more likely what psychic ability is versus fortune or future telling.
Right. Yeah. And I don't really consider myself a fortune teller at all.
Or a future teller. It's more that mediumship piece, right?
Yeah.
So you're the person in between, and they've got some kind of spirit guide giving advice on the future, right?
Right. Well, and that's kind of what mediumship is. So I'll explain mediumship. But that's another gift, and I do have that gift. But this ability allows someone to be able to communicate with those who have already passed on. When I do a reading, I hear at 3 different levels, and I hear from what I call the heavens, my guides, the angels, right? And that is that higher level that's at the top of my head. I hear from there, which I know kind of sounds really strange, but this is the easiest way that I can describe it.
Tough for a skeptic, but I got you. Like kind of like there's an aura around you or something, right?
Right. Well, and I just feel like that information comes more at the top of my head, going downward than anywhere else. Now, if it's a loved one and they're coming through for someone that I'm reading, I kind of hear them at the sides of my head, kind of like from ear to ear, right?
Okay.
If it is an earthbound spirit, their energies are a lot more lower. I feel a heavier presence with them, and I hear them lower. So it would kind of be from below my chin area up to my ears. It follows the curves of my face from the bottom of my ears down to my chin. That's the best way I can describe if I am getting that lower vibration or frequency from a spirit that is earthbound.
Yeah.
Now, I can also tell...
But this is something you've learned from trial and error over the years, correct?
Yeah, it's just how I identify where the information is coming from. Is it coming from a loved one? Am I dealing with an earthbound spirit who needs help? Is it coming from what I call the heavens, and messages from more of a heavenly source like angels, or I even say, from God, in a sense that he's going to give you what information that you need to give that person to help them on their journey. Is it a journey of healing? Is it a journey of guidance? So that's how I identify them. It doesn't mean that every other psychic or intuitive that's out there will be able to, hear or whatever at those same levels. That's just how it works best for me.
So do you think that gift is similar to telepathy in the sense that spirit can telepathically give you messages?
Oh, for sure. I mean, spirits on the other side, they don't have vocal cords, right? And so the theory out there is that it is all done mind-to-mind message. There is no vocal. In fact, I do want to do a podcast on dreams, right? And dream interpretations, but...
You think that's on the similar level with telepathy in a sense, or?
Well, yes and no. What I mean is, like, if someone has a true spirit visitation in a dream, a lot of times they'll find that they're not able to talk back to that spirit, or that spirit might stand there, but yet they're able to understand the spirit.
Right, that's telepathic. Yeah.
Exactly.
There's been a lot of research, and it's picked up again on telepathy. Mm-hmm. There's podcasts out there, and so that's a really difficult topic when you're looking at it from a skeptical viewpoint, because again, a lot of this is very difficult to repeat in a lab, for example, and that's the burden of proof that's out there with skepticism. Skeptics say the environment wasn't completely controlled, although there's people participating in these trying to avoid all of the doubt behind it, but that is something that they are trying to find more proof with scientifically.
The same with spirits.
Yeah, and when the people who are trying to study this, it's very taboo in the science world.
Oh, sure.
So solid proof is always something that we need in science, and so that's why these worlds just stay apart this way. So you have believers, non-believers, skeptics, and psychics that have different viewpoints and share different thoughts about whether these things exist, and there's a lot of debate out there, of course.
Yeah, and I think really it's got to be someone's personal experience. I understand if you don't believe in any of this stuff, I mean, we can agree to disagree,
right?
Which is totally fine. But coming from someone who has had those experiences, we're of course going to believe more in all of these things, all the different supernatural phenomenon that, comes with it.
Right.
Believing, what do they say? Experiencing or seeing is believing, right?
Right.
So I think until some people have those experiences for themselves, they'll remain skeptical.
And that's where the skeptics come in and start doing paranormal research, because there's that desire. Well, some people feel so strongly about what they're experiencing and their gifts that it's like, I want to see it for myself. And sometimes that's not part of their journey. Maybe the experience just never really comes for them because you're constantly looking to disprove. So that's why I try to be an open skeptic. If I'm going to experience something, I have to be open to believing it as something paranormal. But the logical side of me that most of my brain lives in is usually trying to explain it away. So, that's part of my journey. And, everybody has this journey and it's set forth for them, perhaps. Maybe that's what some people believe. And like you were saying, messages you receive are part of your journey and what you're supposed to know and how you're supposed to experience them. So I think it makes good conversation. It makes for a great podcast.
Oh, for sure. I've enjoyed this.
I really want to keep going with more of these topics. We have our own notes that we keep. I wake up in the morning with, here's another good idea we could talk about.
Write that down, right.
So we hope you keep tuning into our podcast for more episodes like this one on more topics related to the paranormal, to psychics, and of course with this skeptic viewpoint. If you have any topics you'd like for us to discuss, you can contact us through our email at psychicandskeptic@gmail.com. If you're interested in our paranormal investigation group, you can go to okpri.com, or you can visit us on Facebook at facebook.com/okparanormal. We also discussed Christy's book. She is published. She wrote a book called Spirits Among Us, A Psychic's Research and Insight into the Realm of Ghosts by Christy Clark. You can find that advertised on our website at okpri.com, or you can purchase it from Amazon or at any of your favorite bookstores.
And I also have my Facebook page. It's called Journey into the Soul. I manage readings on there. I announce when and where I'm going to be offering readings through various spirit fairs in Oklahoma. So check it out.
So you can find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts, and thank you for listening.
Because the paranormal is the normal.
Not yet understood.